Greetings. My name is Augustus C. Foster. Welcome back to another installment of the Man Talk Monday podcast. Today, we wrap up a three-part series as we revisited emotional intelligence in boys. Now, at this point, you've probably listened to the OG version of this from about 8 months to a year ago. After that, you listen to part one, not doing the whole disclosure thing again over legal, any of that. You heard that in part one. In part two, lean more into a bit of the culture that's created that allows for specifically young men to fall victim to not their own devices, but really fall victim to temptations of the world, to lean more into what the culture dictates and allow that to have more pull, more authority, more control, for them to be more convicted to commit for the culture than they are to what they got in the home or what they get in community. And we talked a lot about how in those two specific areas, in the home and in our communities, how we let a toxic culture kind of control our young men. So today, we want to round out this topic from a standpoint of emotional intelligence to talk about a young man who, while different from Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf, the common denominator is the lack of emotional intelligence, the failure to either implement it or recognize it at the most, really for this young man, the most critical point of his life. So, overview of Terrion Arnold, Florida boy, kid from Florida, Catholic school kid, good family, no craziness about him. You hear some joking stories about him in college from teammates where now people say, maybe they thought he was a quote unquote crash out, but nothing to the extent of where people thought this man posed a legitimate threat to anyone. Terrion Arnold goes through, he's All-American, superstar athlete, climbs the ranks, gets every rating that you would want from a respective website like a Rivals or an ESPN. Believe he goes to the U.S. Army Bowl, which is like a huge deal. He's everybody's All-American. Like, he is the guy. And to prove he's the guy, he ends up at Alabama. Now, if you're not a college football fan, you want a little bit of context, Alabama is a college football blue blood. They go in every season for the past at least 20 years with the expectation of not just winning, but dominating and winning championships. Their coach, Nick Saban, you've seen him on Aflac commercials with Deion Sanders. Right now, he's raising up a bit of drama for himself by pushing back against NIL. But again, topic for another day. The main thing here is Terrion Arnold went to an institution that, even though they're good academically, are known for their strong athletic prowess. He went to a dominant program. He didn't, no disrespect, I love my father dearly, he didn't go to Ball State. God rest my mother's soul. Didn't go to Toledo. Love a handful of my relatives. This isn't Dominican in Michigan. This isn't Cleveland State. This isn't from a standpoint of athletics. Again, no disrespect. This isn't Langston in Oklahoma. This isn't Cal Poly. This isn't the Toreros of San Diego. This is Alabama. This is Roll Tide. This is big SEC football. This is an institution that was notorious for quote unquote bagmen before the arrival of NIL. Only the best of the best, the elite of the elite, even got a phone call, let alone an official visit. because the official visit meant we really want this kid here. Drop off the money, the women, the whatever this person's vice is, make sure they get it. That's Alabama. That's major college football. And that is where Terrion Arnold got dropped off. 17 years old, world in front of him, high level talent, dominates in the SEC. Born winner, born winner. Goes up, goes out to the NFL draft, goes in the first round. Now, gonna stop here because I need you to understand something. Florida kid, Catholic high school routing, all American, tons of schools in front of him, Alabama football. For you to understand, Alabama football, about 80% of that roster is made up of guys just like that. The other, let's say 80, 85, the other 15, 20% are scholarship guys or walk-ons, dudes who will likely go into coaching, or their major, the joke is, they'll major in something other than football. The other 15, 20% of dudes on the roster, that's their mindset coming in. That other 80% of guys on the roster, they legitimately believe they're going to make it. So you got to think that team has a ton of kids, a ton of 21, 22, 23-year-old young men who have goals and aspirations of making it to the NFL, not to play professionally. Again, I got homeboys who play Arena League. They play in Mexico. They play in Europe. They play in Canada. They enjoy it. It's just, for the love of the game. That is not that 80% of dudes on that roster. Those dudes want to go to the NFL. They don't want to go to Canada. They don't want to make a fraction of the money. The goal is to make it to the NFL. That's the brand. And Terrion Arnold, out of all those dudes, out of all those guys, he and another handful of teammates get drafted, but he doesn't get drafted in the second or the seventh. He's drafted in the first round. He's a one percenter of a one percenter of a one percenter. SEC football, yeah. I mean, you start high school football. Most dudes who go from high school don't make it to the SEC. JUCO, NAIA, D2, some never play again. The majority will never play another down after high school. He gets to the SEC, wins championships, gets drafted first round. You're looking at a 0.05%, some insane number like that. That's where Terrion Arnold is. I'm giving you all of this context. I'm giving you all of this background so that you could understand that this 23-year-old man, with all of this, with the big money contract, sure, he's battled through a couple of injuries. He's had some issues, but everything in front of him. And at 23 years old, some items go missing from his Airbnb. And he decides, once those items go missing, not to call the police, not to call the local authorities, not to call the person who owned or managed the Airbnb, not to call his agent, not to call his manager, not to call team security, not to do anything that a civilian is supposed to do. Now, the reason I use civilian is because I'm going to get into a bit of coarse language in a second. Born and raised in Los Angeles, California. In California, streetwise, gang-wise, you would have people who, you were a gang member, you were affiliated, you were associated. That is what you were. But the people who were out of the way, they were out of the way. They were deemed as civilians. The grandmother in the neighborhood who called the police on a dope dealer, people left her alone. The drug dealers and the gang members left her alone because she wasn't a snitch. She was a civilian doing what she needed to do. She wasn't anybody from the street. She wasn't involved. So when she called the authorities, she did what she was supposed to do. Now, the gang member from down the street, him calling the police, that's a snitch. That's a rat, because we're involved in the same racket. We're running the same sin-filled, crazy gang life. So for you to call the authorities is weak. That's cowardice. Because you're supposed to resolve it in a street way because you're a street dude. Now, full disclosure, regardless of the stories that people toss around about Terrion Arnold, at no point does anything about this kid say street nigga. Nothing about him says back in blood. And do you know how I know nothing about him says that? Because he wouldn't have been a first round pick, because he wouldn't have ended up at Alabama. There'll be people say, well, insert person slip through the cracks. How often does somebody slip through the cracks who you look and pinpoint at 17, 18 years old on a visit and go, this person's a future felon. This person will commit robbery, homicide, some heinous crime. Rarely. So when Terrion Arnold realizes that some of his items are missing and he doesn't follow the protocol of a civilian, something in his brain, something in his mind clicks and says, back in blood. Something with him decided in that very moment for me to prove to these people that I'm not soft, that I'm a real nigga. I'm going to call my homeboys. We're going to get a couple girls. We're going to set these dudes up. My brother in Christ, are you laced? Are you cool? See, the other reason that I know Terrion Arnold isn't a street dude is because, and this isn't me with a lawyer hat, this is me growing up around street dudes. You're telling me you got on FaceTime in the midst of the crime. Now, if you don't understand the crime, they used some girls to set two dudes up who they believed were the ones who stole the items. These dudes, hot, heavy, horny, all of that, they go into the room looking for the girls, pop out. Hey, dudes with guns. Now they get beat up, they get pistol whipped, they get guns pulled on them. They're already held in the house. Now they're taken from one place to another. In the process of this, there's a group text talking about how to violate these dudes, what to do to them, how to hurt them, how to harm them. At some point in juncture in time, Terrion Arnold gets on FaceTime to watch these activities go down. Now, revert back to about a minute ago and telling you that this ain't no street dude. Because no street dude, no gangster, no real credible person involved on that side of life gets on FaceTime with their future co-defendants to record the activity. No one gets in a group text to mention we're involved. It's like that scene in The Wire where he's taking Robert's rule notes. Like, are you taking notes on a criminal enterprise? You got in a group text discussing a plot to commit a felonious act. That's not a street dude. I don't want to hear from anybody saying, well, sometimes real dude. No. No person entrenched that deep into that lifestyle is stupid enough to do something like that. Now, what does this have to do with emotional intelligence? Everything. Part of emotional intelligence, the key thing is navigating circles outside of your home, dealing with people. This was a kid with all of it in front of him. He was the quote unquote bag, and he's surrounded by yes men. And I know he's surrounded by yes men for a fact because they're now his co-defendants who likely snitched on him, who likely turned informant. What are we doing here? What in your brain told you? How did it process to say this is okay? Why did you choose to avoid the processes set up for you as a civilian, as a multi-millionaire NFL player who lives in a gated community? What in your brain, how much does the culture influence you that your response wasn't, let me call the cops? It was, I've got to figure this out on my own. I'm going to show them. Again, I go back to Carmelo Anthony. Mess around with me and see what happens. I go back to Austin Metcalf with the pushing and the shoving. No one went and got an adult. Terrion Arnold has the power of the police, has the power of a claim filed with his insurance for insured items, but he doesn't do it because something in him, his lack of emotional intelligence, getting on a FaceTime to watch people be assaulted and beaten at your instruction, doesn't just lack empathy, lacks brain cells, lacks critical thinking. From the communication aspect, it's simple. Call the police, call the authorities, call the people who that's your lane. You're not a gangster. You're not a tough guy. You're not a thug. You're an NFL player who moves around 16 to 18 weeks out of the year with private paid for team security at all of your events, with local PD expedited at the push of a button. But all of those things were abandoned because the culture dictated that he figure it out. The culture said he got to get it back in blood. And his emotional intelligence failed. So instead of reading the room and processing it as I've been wronged, but I know the people who could correct this and get it right, he went to this odd default where the people around him were just fine with him doing it. Terrion Arnold recently was released by the Detroit Lions, but per his agent, there's 2-3 teams lined up to sign him. That's great for him long term, financially, for his family, for generational wealth, but it's bad long term from a standpoint of emotional intelligence and our sons, because I'm not wishing prison on anyone. No. But what I'm saying is when a millionaire athlete makes a mistake as egregious as setting someone up to be kidnapped, beaten, and robbed in retaliation for a crime, that come to find out those guys didn't even take the stuff. When a football player is released and immediately clears waivers and people say, well, it meant, we could get him at a discounted deal. It gives the notion of the perception to young men that, man, I can bounce back from this. And it's not that they can't. But the lesson in it is, it worked for him. And it sets a bad precedent because it gives them the mindset that it could absolutely work for me. And again, I'm not saying that it won't, but more often than not, it doesn't. And I can say that factually because prisons are filled with young men who look a lot like me and Terrion Arnold, who thought the exact same thing. Who thought, I read this wrong, I communicated wrong, I lacked empathy, I did this incorrectly, but it'll work out for me. And they're not Terrion Arnold. And they're not me. In conclusion, I want you all to get out of this. If you do not put into your son the importance of how to control his anger, when to be vulnerable, how to regulate his emotions, how to communicate to people, how to perceive communication, how to process others' words, how to move in circles outside of your homes. If you do not emphasize to your sons to think before they act, we're going to continue with Terrion Arnold's, with Austin Metcalf's, and Carmelo Anthony's. But I want better for your sons. The question is, do you want better for them? Love y'all. Appreciate y'all for tapping in with the series. Like, subscribe, follow, all that. God bless. Talk to y'all on the next one. Peace.